Hello and welcome back to my place, Dr. Jackie. Thanks for joining me for my number 2 in the series of Walk with Me through my journey of DID. So I told you about the inner child tape and how we brought April out of her box in the backyard and brought her into therapy, where she spoke with my therapist. And I remember sitting in therapy, listening to April talk to my therapist and tell him that she was mad at me because the last time she came into therapy, I made her tell him that her name was Jackie and her name is actually April, and she wanted him to know that. And she said that the reason that Jackie didn't want you to know is because Jackie doesn't believe in me and she doesn't want to know that there's others. Man, I remember hearing that and going, oh, you got to be kidding me. What do you mean there's others? It really kind of blew my mind. But that was the beginning of a lot of time of me spending trying to make everything go away and trying to basically not believe it was real. I did a lot of writing, I did a lot of work in therapy and at home, but it was still very hard to realize. When I was diagnosed with multiple personality disorder, MPD, or DID, dissociative identity disorder, as we know it to be now. I'm going to read some excerpts out of my first book, which is Multiple Personality, One Woman's Journey from Discovery to Recovery, and share with you some of the things and the places that I was at as I was beginning my process of this journey. As I started working with DID, there was not a whole lot of stuff out there for me to really delve into. There was a couple of books and stories of somebody that had had DID. Um, but basically, there was no kind of a manual that really made sense to me. There was one that I read parts of. So as I studied, I realized that when a person experiences great trauma, the need to escape the pain and embarrassment, the intensity and the confusion, the person creates another personality or altered personalities that hold those feelings of the experiences that are too hard to hold. It's like you just reach your capacity to experience what you're experiencing, and the body separates and the personality is created. When there's a lot of abuse, a lot of personalities are created. And it is a protective mechanism for us to get through the trauma. However, as you get older, that protective mechanism is no longer a protection. It now becomes a hindrance to what's going on in your life. So, this disorder is curable. I am living proof of that fact. And I want you to know some things about it. So why in my 30s did this come out? I wrote in my book, when we build a protection from hurt and pain, we are not going to let that protective barrier down unless we feel safe and trust the people around us. So also, I was searching for answers for questions about my life. What situations happening repeatedly, I kept trying to change, but nothing was working. I had to be in, I had been in therapy for 2 years before this diagnosis, after which I had 5 additional personalities make their presence known within 2 weeks, because I had created a safe place for with my therapist, and all the alters wanted to be a part of that and have their say. The beginning was very frustrating, confusing, and very scary and crazy making. I had a difficult time understanding why all these things were happening, and there were far more questions than answers. I wrote, coping with the reality. After April, my 5-year-old alter came into therapy And being diagnosed with MPD, currently known as dissociative identity disorder, the next couple of weeks were crazy. I had 5 additional personalities appear, and it was getting to be a fight to talk in therapy. Sometimes I felt so crowded that I oftentimes very confusing. It was like this. You go out on stage, you're doing your part, and there's people in the backgrounds and in the wings of the stage talking, and you can't hear yourself think. But that's kind of what it's like. There was just too many voices and too many wanted to talk, and it was like we almost had to make a schedule who could come into therapy. So did my therapist create my personalities? No, emphatically no. I had them for the greater part of my life. My therapist just named it. I had created a safe place for my memories to come forth, and I had a desire to understand some things about my life. We will not remember any more than we can handle. Although sometimes I do believe that I had way more than I could handle. But through the grace of God, I was able to get through it. Also, there comes a time in in our lives when we want to move ahead, and we have to look into our past or close the door on it. So looking into our past and moving on is very difficult because we have to look at parts of us that we may not be very proud of or want to admit are there. We have to be willing to see the darker side of ourselves, and we all have that side. Understand it is not bad. We just need to look so we can know what we are dealing with. We can choose to close the door. Many people say it is in the past, leave it in the past. Our past is the past. I can't remember how many people would tell me, stop thinking about it. It's in the past. Let it stay there. It does not matter. Others told me to forget it. If you choose to close the door, you are also making a choice to limit your growth and progression. Do not get me wrong. Some things from the past do not need to be looked at for very long. But when you have things in your present happening over and over, and you cannot figure out why, you have to look into the past history. I used to say, when the past keeps slapping you in the face, you need to find out why. So that was the beginning of figuring out how I was going to cope with what was happening in my life, how to understand what I was going to do with all these different personalities. And taking a look at all of them, it was just too hard. And a lot of times in my writings, my other altered personalities would write that Jackie's gone again. She's left us to clean up the messes. And it's because that was, again, my protective mechanism. The only difference is now I was knowing what was going on, where before I just did it and they took over, and now they're telling me how they feel about it. And we had a lot of that going on. In our next session, we're going to talk about that, to talk about the communications, how to communicate, how to understand, how to take a look at the internal dialogue and what to do with that, how that can help you actually work through the dissociative disorder and bring you to a place of healing and protection. Remember, you are a special personality, and you are indeed a child of God. And through the Savior Jesus Christ, I was able to go through this, endure it, learn about it, and become a better person because of it. Remember, don't let your abuse define who you are. Let it refine who you are. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for subscribing with me. And we'll see you on the next part of my journey. Take good care. Bye.